Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you, and this time I'm kicking off my reviews of the second season of Riverdale. Now, with the first season, I did kind of a season one review. This time I've decided to just full on add Riverdale to my review docket. I really enjoyed the first season. I'm really enjoying this season so far. So I think it's going to be a nice addition. Plus, most of the shows that I review already are CW, so why not just kind of keep going on with that theme? So we've got our new season kicked off here with A Kiss Before Dying. And all in all, I thought this was a pretty solid entry. I mean, it literally picking up just like right where season one left off. And let's just kind of get right into things. So we're kind of introduced to a new character here. We don't really know who they are. It looks like they're going to be using the name the Angel of Death for the fellow in the mask with the green eyes. A lot of people are convinced that this is actually a character called the Black Hood, I believe it is, that is sort of a roughly Punisher-like character that Archie Comics also happens to own the rights to, and I don't know anything about this character. Um, but, you know, it would be certainly interesting to see something like that here on Riverdale, and it is more than a little amusing that there actually was years and years ago a story called where Archie met the Punisher in a kind of a jokey crossover with Marvel Comics that I've actually read, and it's basically about as silly as you can imagine. Although I will say a lot of points for the final joke at the very end of that story. That was quite brilliant. But anyways, so we've got this killer here. And like I said, the idea of a vigilante running around in Riverdale and in Greendale, which I guess is the setting of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is apparently in development as its own series to be called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, after the more serious and darker comic book of the same name. Initially there was a lot of talk about bringing Sabrina on Riverdale as kind of a guest character in season two. Not really sure exactly the details of what's going on with that Chilling Adventures of Sabrina thing, but it certainly does sound intriguing. Anyway, as I was saying, the idea of bringing in kind of a vigilante character who may or may not be particularly thorough in determining who deserves to be punished and who does not, that certainly is very intriguing. I mean, our whole thing last year was trying to find a murderer, someone who had unquestionably done something terrible. And now here we have a vigilante who is going out there and, perhaps in theory, punishing people who have done terrible things, which in a town as messed up as Riverdale, on paper, sounds like a good thing. But here, in basically almost killing Archie's dad, who we know to be a good person, it shows that line of thinking for being very flawed. Now you have to understand, one of my favorite characters in comics is the Punisher. I love, I love reading Punisher stories. But the Punisher isn't someone that I would never approve of in real life. The Punisher is fun to enjoy as a fictional character, but if there was somebody actually like this running around, they would not be a person to be applauded. And even Garth Ennis, the writer of some of the most critically acclaimed Punisher stories of all time, has basically even flat out said, the Punisher is not an admirable person, and you shouldn't be looking up to him. So, anyway, aside, let's kind of continue on. And it was certainly interesting to see Black Hood off Miss Grundy, Jennifer whatever, at the end. But I kind of like, because one, it's very shocking. You certainly don't expect to see her back, and then suddenly she's back, and then she's dead. But it makes sense. I think that was basically the kind of her. This character has been basically kind of played out, and here you get to bring her back and have her serve the story one last time. I mean, it was made quite clear that her coming back to Riverdale was not something that would be welcome, especially seeing as how she could almost certainly have been charged with statutory rape if for sleeping with an underage boy. Or okay, let's just not worry about that. So yes, that was a smart movie. Very interesting there. Let's see. So what else do we have to talk about? Speaking of stuff that's pretty crazy, Cheryl and that scene with her mom in the hospital, that was pretty intense. You don't mess with Cheryl Blossom. And now that she's sort of gotten past a lot of the things that were, you know, causing her all this emotional distress in the first season, well, now Cheryl's very much on firm ground and is certainly bringing all the lessons that she has learned about ruthlessness in the Blossom household to bear. And, Dad's not around to do anything, and Mom is in bad shape. So, yeah, look out. So, yeah, I'm really liking that. And I love how like she just blatantly lies to like Jughead and Betty about what happened to her mother, and they are both obvious. They can obviously tell that she's just spinning BS, but are just so utterly freaked out by how calm she is that they just go along with it. I mean, that was great. That was beautiful. Let's see. What else do we need to talk about here? Speaking of Jughead and Betty, I do like that Betty was pretty frank with her mom. Like, yeah, Jughead and I were basically about to do it, and then we got interrupted by some bikers. That's the sort of forthrightness that one generally does not expect with parents. And I do like that her mom was willing to say, "It's like, oh, for God's sakes, if you had sex with that boy, at least tell me you were safe." Again, a surprising amount of frankness here, but I do like that they are not really holding any illusions here as to how teenagers actually act, at least in that regard. And I also really like sort of Jughead's explanation as to why he apparently seems so eager to throw in with the serpents. I mean, he does make a really good point. There are a bunch of bikers in front of your house basically saying, like, hey, we consider you a member of our gang. Cool? Well, yeah, saying no under those circumstances probably wouldn't have been a very good idea. And Jughead does kind of make the point quickly that, maybe I can sort of use my connections with these guys to find out some information. And he does, but he learns pretty quick and painful lesson about why, screwing around with biker gangs is not a wise thing. These are not people that you take lightly under any circumstances. And as insightful as he is, Jughead is still a young man, and in some ways, uh, still an immature young man with a little bit of naivete still in him, even though he probably doesn't quite realize that. The world is a bigger and badder place than even Jughead realizes, and it's sort of nice to see him get a reminder of that. Let's see. Really good stuff with Veronica this episode. I mean, that really antagonistic relationship she has with her mother, where she basically kind of says like, "Okay, did you have Fred Andrews shot?" And that just sort of real claws out, sort of like, "It doesn't matter that you're my daughter. If you mess with me, you will seriously regret it." I mean, it's just so utterly soap opera, and yet, if you know people from families that are kind of like this, it does really ring true that there are people like this out there in the world. I've actually been spending a lot of time lately listening to this thing called the History of Rome podcast, and it's this chronological history of the Roman Empire. And when you look at some of the stuff that went on in like the families of all of these really important people in the Roman Empire, it's just like, wow. You hear stuff about like, yeah, like I was reading about like, a guy, he basically had his two own nephews executed. I mean, it's pretty crazy stuff. But the lodges and the blossoms are in that regard cut from very similar cloth. And this time around, we do get to see Hiram Lodge finally, after him sort of being floating around in the background for all of season one. Well, here he is in Riverdale, and we've already seen that Hiram is not a man to be taken lightly. We've got this Black Hood fellow who's this physical threat, but Hiram is a guy who kind of excels at that whole puppet master thing, playing things behind the scene, using wealth and influence to get what he wants. And just seeing what he's going to get up to in Riverdale is going to be very interesting, especially given the situation that, you know, Veronica is basically Archie's girlfriend at this point. I mean, we even get that rather sexy scene with them in the shower. And I really do love that scene afterwards where Archie more or less basically tells Veronica, GTFO. And for a minute, I'm just watching this scene, I'm like, oh my God, Archie, you're the biggest jerk in the world. How could you do this to her? And it looks like Veronica is actually about to leave, and then she just turns around and says, like, I know what you're doing. You're trying to push me away. Well, I'm not going to let you do it. You can say and do whatever you want. I'm not leaving. And ultimately, Archie just quickly crumbles and breaks down. I mean, that was a beautiful moment. That shows that, you know, just how strong a person Veronica really can be, and that, you know, while she certainly does have her flaws, she's also someone who's quite capable, despite what she even she herself says, of being a very empathetic person. You know, Archie has really stuck his neck out there for a lot of people. He's a good guy, and he doesn't deserve this. Fred doesn't deserve this. And, you know, standing by him in this terrible, terrible moment in his life, and not even letting him get in the way of her helping him, yeah, that really says something about Veronica, about, again, her personal strength of character, I really think. And just for the record, if anybody's wondering, Veronica is actually my favorite Archie character. I like her because in the comics, Veronica is a very flawed person, but you do see that deep down she is basically a good person. And that's a very simple thing, but it really, I think, sells her character to me. Um, but again, that's just sort of how I interpret it all. The whole thing with the weird dreams while Fred was in the coma, I was like, things like that always are a little more miss than hit for me, but that's just a matter of personal taste. Although I was immensely weirded out by that cameo by Jason this episode that I was not expecting. That was kind of like, whoa. Let's see, what else do we have to talk about? No, I do think that kind of covers everything that I had to say about this episode. Now, I'm probably not going to try and speculate too much while I do these reviews. I'm not a big person into theory crafting, although I'm sure I will end up doing it just a little bit. But I am very intrigued for finding out what's going to be going on. Like, you know, who is this Angel of Death person? Why was Fred targeted? What's going on? What happened? What really did happen in that barn, like Cheryl talked about? I mean, they're doubtlessly going to introduce more mysteries as things roll along. So it's going to be a fun season. I can already tell. I'm very pumped to watch this season. Yeah, I'm also going to be kind of interested to watch my Facebook because I know for a fact my stepsister is a big Riverdale fan too. So I'm going to be interested to see what she says. Anyway, guys, I'm going to call it here. So as always, please comment, rate, subscribe. Of course, you can join me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and please also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.